After the reading of my late grandmother's will, nearly $500,000, I rushed home. I wanted to tell my husband the news. But when I heard my name coming from inside the apartment, and my husband talking to his mother, I nearly collapsed on the spot. Hi there. Before we begin, let us know where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the story. My knees were shaking, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might leap out of my chest. $500,000. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The notary, a silver-haired, gentle-eyed man with horn-rimmed glasses who looked uncannily like my high school physics teacher, Samuel Morrison, had just read my grandmother Eleanor Grace's will. It felt surreal, like I was watching an American movie where the heroine suddenly inherits a fortune. Only it was real. And it was happening to me. Victoria Anderson, I need your signature here. The notary's voice pulled me back to reality, to the cold, dusty office, with its worn-out carpet and piles of papers stacked high on a massive desk. I brushed away tears from my cheeks. My grandma had been the last thread tying me to my childhood, to my parents, to those carefree summer days. 2 weeks ago, that thread snapped. She'd raised me since I was 6, after my parents died in a car accident on the highway between Chicago and Detroit, returning from a long-awaited vacation. All I had left of them were yellowed black and white photos with curled edges, a few faded letters, and my grandma's stories, the ones I listened to every night before falling asleep. Where did she get that kind of money? I asked, stunned and almost afraid. She worked her whole life as a regular engineer at General Electric. She earned, $3,500 a month and got a Thanksgiving bonus. Eleanor Grace was a remarkably wise and forward-thinking woman, the notary said, handing me another stamped and signed document. Back in the early 90s, when a lot of retirees lost their savings during the financial crisis, she invested in oil company stocks. Everyone thought it was a crazy move back then, but she seemed to see the future. And the apartment in Lincoln Park, the one she inherited from her sister. She's been renting it out for the last 15 years. I nodded, but my thoughts drifted. I kept seeing flashes from the past. My grandma patiently teaching me hopscotch in the courtyard of our old apartment building, drawing chalk squares on the pavement. Reading me The Wizard of Oz at bedtime, mimicking all the characters' voices. Standing in food voucher lines for hours in the late 80s so I could have proper meals. Crying quietly at night, thinking I was asleep. Giving me her only pair of gold earrings, the ones with tiny rubies, so I could buy textbooks for teaching college in 1998, after our savings were wiped out in the economic crash. Turns out, behind her quiet humility and modest lifestyle was a financial savviness I never even suspected. Victoria Anderson, just a reminder, you'll need to pay the inheritance tax, as required by law, the notary went on while I mindlessly signed one paper after another. Of course. I'll take care of it, I answered automatically, though I had no idea how any of that worked or how much it would cost. When I stepped out of the notary's office into the bright April sunshine, I took a deep breath of spring air. I was 38, had been teaching Russian literature at a regular school in Chicago for 15 years. Lived with my husband, Matthew, in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, constantly counting pennies between paychecks. Well, I used to. Everything was supposed to change now. But how? I walked through the familiar streets of Lincoln Park, the neighborhood I'd grown up in. Past the old bookstore where Grandma used to buy me fairy tale collections and school readers, saying books were the best investment. Past the park where we fed pigeons and ate popsicles on holidays. In my pocket was a creased black and white photo, Grandma as a young woman, her thick blonde braid over her shoulder, wearing a prim dress with a white lace collar. My lucky charm. My thoughts tumbled over one another like autumn leaves in the wind. How was I going to tell Matthew about the inheritance? We'd been married 12 years, but lately something between us had shifted. He stayed late at work more and more, grew short-tempered, and sometimes I caught the smell of alcohol. Maybe this money could help us start over, buy the spacious apartment we always dreamed about, take a real vacation for once instead of visiting his mother's cottage, redecorate the place. I hadn't noticed my feet had carried me all the way to the Lincoln Park subway station. Out of habit, I reached into my bag for my transit pass, then paused. I could just call a taxi now. For the first time in my life, I could splurge without guilt. But something inside stopped me. It was Grandma's voice, as clear as if she were standing next to me. Money comes and goes, Victoria, but the habit of luxury stays. Stay humble, and life will be kinder to you. Wealth is a test, not everyone passes. So I went down into the subway, weaving through the rush hour crowd like I always had. The train car was stuffy, smelled like dust, cheap perfume, and someone's takeout. Across from me sat an elderly woman who looked so much like my grandmother, same wise gray eyes, same tidy hairdo, same teacherly gaze that used to catch every mischief I tried to hide as a child. My chest tightened. The weight of the law still hadn't sunk in. $500,000 echoed in my head, in rhythm with the clattering of the subway wheels. I'd never seen that much money in my life, couldn't even imagine it. With that kind of money, we could buy a spacious apartment downtown, get Matthew the car he'd been talking about for the last 5 years. I could even start a small publishing house for children's books, my long-time dream. Or just, live. Without fear of tomorrow, without counting every penny, without choosing between a new pair of boots and a visit to the dentist. I dragged myself toward our building, climbed to the 7th floor. The elevator was out of order, as usual, and reached into my bag for the key. But I froze, hand in midair. I heard voices inside, Matthew's and his mother's. Margaret Peterson was here. That was odd. She usually warned us before coming over, always picking the worst possible time for me. I still don't get why you married her in the first place, came my mother-in-law's annoyed voice, loud enough through the door. She's just a plain schoolteacher. No prospects, no connections, no dowry. I was hoping you'd come to your senses eventually, but you're still dragging that dead weight. Mom, not now, Matthew replied, clearly tired and irritated. There's talk of more layoffs at work. I could be next. That's exactly my point. Margaret exclaimed triumphantly. You need a wife who can support you in hard times, not one who drags you down with her pathetic $3,000 salary. Sarah Williams keeps asking why you stopped seeing her daughter, Catherine. She's a commercial director now, for a big company. She's got connections, influence. And if it comes to divorce, it'll be clean, I've looked into it. I winced, a lump forming in my throat. I'd been hearing this same old tune for 12 years. To Margaret, I'd never been good enough for her precious son. I reached for the doorbell, but then Matthew said something that nailed me to the spot. Can you believe it? Her grandma died and left her something, he said casually. They were reading the will today. Victoria went to the notary this morning. What if it's something big? His mother asked, and for the first time, I heard greed in her voice, something I'd never noticed before. The old lady lived alone in a 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park. That's worth decent money on its own. Oh, please, Mom. What money? She was just an old schoolteacher. Maybe the apartment, sure, but it's in Victoria's name. I checked, Matthew replied, and there was something unfamiliar in his tone, something that sent a chill through me. We already talked about it. If we sell her grandma's place, we could finally buy a proper 3-bedroom house instead of this shoebox. I froze, stunned. Matthew and I never discussed selling grandma's apartment. Not once. It had never even crossed my mind to part with the one thing still connecting me to my childhood, to my parents. You two talked about it? Margaret asked, clearly surprised. And she agreed to sell. Not exactly, Matthew chuckled. But I'm working on it. She'll come around. She'll see it's the best option for everyone. Still, Margaret pressed on, who knows? Maybe there really is something big. Old people can be sneaky. My father, rest his soul, kept savings bonds from the 60s. Can you imagine? And Victoria's grandma, if I remember right, was an engineer. That was a respectable job back in the day. Maybe she had some savings. What savings, Mom? Everything burned in the 90s. You know that. What about the apartment? Margaret kept going. You should push for her to put your name on it too. You never know. Something could happen, and you'd be left with nothing. Now's the time. She's in such a state, she'll sign whatever you ask her to. A hot wave rose from my chest to my throat. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to lean against the wall just to stay upright. Was this really my husband? The man I'd lived with for 12 years. The man I'd split my last piece of bread with when he lost his job and we survived on my teacher's salary. The man who once swore to love me forever, through good times and bad. Don't worry, Mom, Matthew said, with a smug, almost cocky tone. I've got it all figured out. I'll suggest we open a joint account, just for convenience. She's always been so trusting. She'll say yes. And if she doesn't? Margaret sounded nervous now. Then we'll have to take a different route, Matthew replied, and something in his voice sent shivers down my spine. I know a guy at a law firm. He mentioned a few options. But it won't come to that. Victoria loves me. She trusts every word I say. Let's hope so, Margaret sighed. Just don't miss your chance. If she comes into money, others might start giving her advice too. I stood frozen, unable to move. Every word was like a knife to the heart. 12 years. 12 years with a man who, it turns out, had just been waiting for the right moment to take advantage of me. A man who was now scheming with his mother about how best to trick me out of my inheritance. Suddenly, I remembered how a few months ago, Matthew started acting oddly considerate. Making breakfast, asking about my job, even bringing me flowers for no reason. Before that, he'd been distant and cold for weeks. Had he already known about Grandma's condition back then? A memory flashed in my mind. Grandma once mentioned how Matthew had been calling her, asking how she was feeling, offering help. She was surprised by the sudden attention. Isn't her mother entitled to any of it? Margaret Peterson asked abruptly. What mother? Have you forgotten? Victoria's an orphan. Her parents died when she was 6. That's why she grew up with the old lady, Matthew said, annoyed. Oh, right. I completely forgot. Even better for us, no other claimants, Margaret replied matter-of-factly, like she was discussing furniture shopping and not someone's life. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. Even better for us. They were already dividing up my grandmother. My inheritance. My life. As if I weren't a person, just some financial opportunity. A fury I'd never felt before started building inside me. 12 years. 12 years this man had been by my side, sharing my bed, eating the dinners I cooked, accepting my love and care, and all this time. She should be back soon, Matthew's voice cut through my thoughts. Let's not say anything about the inheritance. Let her bring it up. We'll act surprised. I'll grab a bottle of champagne, make it look like we're celebrating. Then I'll ease into a conversation about our future, investments, and all that. Smart boy, Margaret said approvingly. I always knew you'd land on your feet. Just be careful. Quiet ones like her can be unpredictable. Her grandma wasn't as simple as she seemed. The granddaughter might be the same. Victoria. Matthew laughed, and the sound, once so familiar, now made my skin crawl. She's as trusting as a child. Believes in all that crap, love, honesty, loyalty. You know why I married her? She's easy. No drama, no jealousy, no suspicions. With someone like her, a man can do whatever he wants. Still, don't get too comfortable, Margaret insisted. We could be talking about serious money here. The key is to act fast. Once she gets the inheritance, you need to. I didn't stay to hear the rest. Quietly, carefully, I stepped back from the door and made my way down the stairs. My legs were shaking, my head was spinning. Out on the street, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I had to do something, but my mind was a blur. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Who could I talk to? Who would listen? I had no family left. My parents were gone. Grandma was gone. And friends, after years of teaching and marriage, I barely had any left. Isabella. We'd been friends since college. We hadn't seen each other much lately, but I knew I could count on her. Isabella, it's me, I said, my voice shaking. Victoria. What's wrong? She asked, clearly concerned. I need to see you. Right now. I can't go back home. What happened? You sound off, she said gently. She'd always been sensitive like that. I'll explain everything in person. Can I come over? Of course. I'm home. Do you remember the address? Yes, I remember. Thank you, Isabella. I'll be there in an hour. I shoved my phone back into my bag and headed for the subway. Snippets of the overheard conversation kept replaying in my head. Believes in all that nonsense. Love, honesty, loyalty. Move fast. I've got it all planned. Every word stung like a whip. 12 years with someone who, as it turns out, had been faking it all along. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I didn't bother to wipe them away. People on the train stared or looked away awkwardly, but I didn't care. Something inside me had snapped, something precious. My faith in people. My trust. My ability to love. I didn't know. I only knew one thing, I wasn't going home. Not tonight. Isabella lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Rogers Park. She worked as an editor at a small educational publishing house, was divorced, and raised a teenage son. We met during our freshman year of college, assigned as dorm roommates, and had stayed friends through all of life's twists and turns. When I showed up at her door, red-eyed and trembling, she didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and led me to the kitchen. It was a typical little kitchen in an old apartment building, a Whirlpool fridge from the early 2000s, worn cabinets, a table with a fruit-patterned tablecloth, and 3 mismatched chairs. Tea, coffee? Isabella asked, guiding me to a seat. Or something stronger? I've got brandy. Brandy, I said, surprising even myself. I hadn't touched hard liquor since the New Year's party at school over 6 months ago. Without a word, Isabella pulled out a bottle of brandy and 2 small glasses, filled them a third of the way, and sat down across from me. Talk to me, she said simply, looking me straight in the eye. And I did. I told her about Grandma. About the will. About the nearly $500,000. About the conversation I'd overheard. The words poured out of me, broken up by sobs. Isabella listened in silence, occasionally topping off our drinks. When I finally stopped, she took a deep breath. What a scumbag, she said bluntly. Sorry, Victoria, but your husband is a total scumbag. And your mother-in-law's no better. Strangely, those words made me feel a little lighter. Like someone had finally called it what it was, and the truth, bitter as it was, had finally been spoken out loud. "What do I even do now, Isabella?" I asked helplessly. "I can't go back home." "You're staying here," she said without hesitation. "Kevin's with his grandma, his room's free. You can stay as long as you need. We'll figure things out from here." I nodded silently, a lump of gratitude rising in my throat. "What about your grandma's apartment?" Isabella asked, ever practical. "It's yours now, right?" "Yeah. But it's under renovation. Grandma started it a month before she passed. It's unlivable right now." "Got it," she said, nodding. "And the paperwork? The will? Do you have it with you?" I pulled the folder from my bag, the one the notary had given me. "Guard this with your life," Isabella said seriously. "And don't sign anything Matthew gives you. Especially anything about a joint account. He and his mom could drain you dry and you wouldn't even see it coming." "I won't," I said firmly, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder, a sense of resolve. "But what do I do next, Isabella? I mean, it's almost $500,000. That's a huge amount. I've never handled anything like that." "First thing you need is a good lawyer," Isabella said, tapping her fingers on the table thoughtfully. "I know someone, he specializes in inheritance law. I can introduce you." "Thank you, Isabella. That would be amazing." And then, she added, looking at me carefully, "You'll have to figure out what to do about your marriage, after everything you just heard." "I know," I said quietly. "I've already decided. It's over." It hurt, but oddly, I felt a sense of release. Like I'd finally put down a burden I'd carried for years without realizing how heavy it was. My phone buzzed in my bag. I pulled it out. It was Matthew calling. I looked at Isabella, then hit decline. "Good," she said with a firm nod. "Let him stew. You need to get your head straight. Don't think about him. Think about yourself. Your future. You've got options now, real ones. More than you ever dreamed of." The phone buzzed again, a text this time. "Victoria, where are you? I'm worried. It's late. Call me when you see this." "Worried?" Isabella scoffed, glancing at the screen. "More like worried the money's slipping through his fingers." I gave a weak smile, feeling strangely hollow. Just that morning, I'd had a life, a husband I loved, plans for the future. Now all that was gone. All I had left was a broken heart, and nearly $500,000. "You know what shocked me most about that conversation?" I said, staring out the window at the gathering dusk. "Not that they were planning to trick me, but how casually they talked about it. Like it was normal. Like it was no big deal. Because for people like that, it is normal," Isabella said darkly. "They don't think it's wrong. To them, life is a battlefield. Everyone for themselves. If you're not screwing someone over, you're the sucker getting screwed." I nodded, remembering how often Matthew teased me for being too honest, as he put it. He'd laugh when I returned extra change at the store, or when I refused shady deals that would have saved us a few bucks. "You act like you live in some parallel universe," he'd say. "Like you think everyone's decent and honest." I used to think it was just a joke, sweet, even. I never realized what he really meant. "All right," Isabella said, standing up from the table. "You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we start sorting everything out. One step at a time. Together." I gave her a grateful smile, feeling warmth spread through me. Not all was lost, not if people like Isabella still existed in this world. And that meant maybe I wasn't lost either. The phone buzzed on the table again. "Matthew." I firmly pressed the power button. Tomorrow, I said. Everything starts tomorrow. The morning was overcast, as if the weather had matched my mood. I woke up in an unfamiliar room, wrapped in a plaid blanket on a narrow bed. For a few seconds, I struggled to remember where I was, until the memories of yesterday came rushing back. The overheard conversation. My husband's betrayal. My mother-in-law planning how to deceive me. And $500,000 that had turned my life upside down in just one day. Outside, a light rain traced winding paths down the windowpane. In the corner of the room was a desk piled with textbooks and school notebooks. On the wall, a poster of the periodic table and a map of the night sky. Kevin's room, Isabella's teenage son, was exactly what you'd expect, a little messy and smelling faintly of gym shoes. I slowly got up and walked to the window. A plain apartment block across the street, a rundown playground with tilted swings, and a few people hurrying along in the drizzle. Just another morning in Chicago. But my life would never be the same again. My phone, lying on the nightstand, showed 11 missed calls from Matthew and 5 unread messages. I forced myself to read them. Victoria, where are you? I'm worried. Why aren't you answering? What happened? If you're with a friend, just let me know you're okay. I've called everyone you know, no one's seen you. I'm really starting to panic. If I don't hear from you by tonight, I'm going to the police. That last one made me smirk. The police. As if I were some missing object instead of a person with the right to leave whenever I damn well pleased. But I knew that eventually, I'd have to face Matthew. Not now, later, when I was ready. I quickly typed out a short message, I'm with Isabella. I'm fine. We'll talk later. The reply came instantly, thank God. I've been losing my mind. What happened? Why didn't you come home? My finger hovered over the screen. What do I say? I heard you and your mother plotting to scam me. I know you married me for convenience, not love. I know you think I'm some naive fool. I set the phone down without replying. First, I had to get everything else in order. I'd deal with Matthew when I was ready. From the kitchen came the smell of fresh coffee and cheesy toast. Isabella was always an early riser. I quickly washed up in the tiny bathroom, combed my hair with my fingers, no toothbrush or brush in my bag, and joined her. Morning. Isabella was already dressed and fully made up, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, browsing her tablet. How'd you sleep? Thanks, surprisingly okay, considering, I said, sitting across from her. Matthew's blowing up my phone. Says he'll go to the police if I don't show up. What did you tell him? She slid a plate of toast toward me. I said I was here with you and that I'm fine. Good. Let him stew a little. She poured me coffee in a big mug with the Statue of Liberty on it. Now we need to figure out our next move. I talked to Michael Thompson, the lawyer I mentioned. He can see us at 2 today. You've got the documents with you, right? I nodded, gratefully taking the coffee. The hot drink and Isabella's calm, no-nonsense energy helped settle me. What are you going to do about Matthew? She asked, watching me closely. I don't know, I admitted. I mean, I know I can't live with him after what I heard. But I'm not sure how to go about it. Maybe the lawyer can help. If it were me, I wouldn't rush into a divorce just yet, Isabella said, tapping her fingers thoughtfully on the table. Don't get me wrong, Matthew's a snake, and you deserve way better. But right now, it's crucial to keep your money safe. And for that, it's better if he doesn't suspect anything. You're suggesting I go back home and pretend everything's fine. I grimaced. I don't know if I can pull that off. I get it, she said, squeezing my hand. But think about it. If you walk out and file for divorce now, he'll know something's up. He might get aggressive. Might even try to claim part of the inheritance. But if you go back and act like nothing's wrong, you'll buy yourself time to move the money, lock down the paperwork, get things in order. So, deceive him the way he was planning to deceive me, I said with a bitter laugh. Never thought I'd be plotting stuff like this. It's not deception, it's self-defense, Isabella said firmly. He made this a game, not you. You're protecting yourself. And it's not like you're taking something that belongs to him, you're just keeping him from stealing what's yours. She had a point. But the idea of going back, looking Matthew in the eye, smiling, sharing a bed, it made my skin crawl. I don't know, Isabella. I need to think about it, I said, sipping my coffee. First, let's talk to the lawyer. Maybe he'll have another solution. Of course, she nodded. In the meantime, let's sort out some practical stuff. You need anything? Toothbrush, clothes, hairbrush. Yeah, that'd be helpful. But I don't want to go home while Matthew's there. No problem, Isabella said, already rummaging through her closet. We're about the same size. A t-shirt and jeans will do for now. We'll pick up toiletries and whatever else at the store on the way to the lawyer's. Oh, and you should withdraw some cash. Just in case. Why? I asked, confused. Because Matthew might have access to your account info. If he sees a big withdrawal, he'll get suspicious. Better to take out small amounts, just enough to get by for now. I nodded, quietly impressed by how practical Isabella was. I'd never have thought of all this on my own. And one more thing, Isabella continued. You should take a sick leave from work. Tell them you're not feeling well, or that the funeral drained you and you need time to recover. It's the end of the school year, I'm sure the school will understand. That's a good idea, I agreed. I can't imagine standing in front of a class right now, trying to talk about Russian literature. After breakfast, we got ready and headed out. On the way to the subway, we stopped at a supermarket to pick up a few essentials, toothbrush, toothpaste, a comb, micellar water, deodorant. Maybe you should change your look, Isabella suddenly said, eyeing a shelf of hair dye. You know, like in the movies, the heroine on the run changes her appearance so nobody recognizes her. I couldn't help but laugh, for the first time in the past 24 hours. Isabella, come on. Matthew's a jerk, but he's not in the mafia. He's not going to be hunting me all over the city. Still, she shrugged, people lose their minds when it comes to big money. And $500,000 is big. She wasn't wrong, and the thought gave me chills. What if Matthew really did try to track me down? What if he tried to force me to sign something? Take my bank cards? Honestly, I knew almost nothing about inheritance law. As my husband, could he have some kind of legal claim? Feeling unsettled, I walked over to an ATM and withdrew the maximum daily limit, $800. Not much compared to $500,000, but enough to keep me going for a while if needed. Then we headed downtown for the lawyer appointment. The office was in an old building near the Chicago station, solid and impressive, with marble floors, wood-paneled walls, and leather chairs in the waiting area. I instantly felt out of place. I'd never set foot in a place like this. Michael Thompson turned out to be a tall, graying man with calm eyes and a confident, measured way of speaking. He listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes in his pad. So, you inherited $500,000 from your grandmother, and your husband and his mother are scheming to take it from you, he summarized when I finished. And you want to know how to protect yourself and your inheritance, is that correct? Yes, exactly, I nodded. And I also want to know, does my husband have any legal claim to the money? Can he go after it? Excellent question, he said, nodding. Under U.S. law, Any inheritance received by one spouse is considered separate property and is not subject to division in a divorce. Legally speaking, your husband has no right to the money. Relief flooded through me. However, he continued, there are some caveats. If you deposit that money into a joint account, or use it to buy property that's titled to both of you, it can complicate things. So my first piece of advice, do not agree to any joint accounts, don't sign anything without consulting me, and keep all documentation proving the money came through inheritance. What kind of documentation? I asked. The will, the notary's paperwork, bank statements, he explained. Do you have those? I nodded and handed him the folder. Excellent, he said after skimming the contents. Everything seems in order. Now, about your next steps. Your friend is right, from a legal standpoint, now is not the ideal time to file for divorce. If you do it right after receiving the inheritance, your husband may suspect something and try to interfere. He could challenge the will or make other claims, not legally sound, but enough to drag things out and cause trouble. So you're saying I should go back home and pretend like nothing happened? I asked, unable to hide the disappointment in my voice. Not necessarily, he said thoughtfully, tapping his pen on the desk. There are other ways. For example, you could tell your husband you need time to grieve, that you want to stay with a friend for a while. That gives you space to sort out the financial side without raising any red flags. And if he doesn't accept that? I asked, remembering how persistent Matthew could be. Then we take a firmer approach, Thompson replied, his tone sharpening. You can file for divorce and request a protective order if you feel threatened. But I'd recommend starting with the softer route. The fewer confrontations, the smoother this process will be. I glanced at Isabella. The lawyer's advice made sense. All right, I said slowly. I'll try to tell Matthew I just need some time. But what about the money? How do I protect it? I recommend opening a new account at a different bank, Thompson said. Preferably with a large, reputable institution. Transfer the money there. Do it discreetly, to avoid any suspicion. And if you'd like, I can refer you to a financial advisor who can help you with managing and investing the funds. That would be great, I said gratefully. One more thing, he added, leaning forward, his expression serious. If you feel even the slightest threat to your safety, contact me immediately. We can go to the police and file for a protection order. Your husband needs to understand that any unlawful action will have consequences. You really think it could come to that? I asked, a trace of fear in my voice. I'm not trying to scare you, he said gently. But I want you to be prepared. Sadly, I've seen cases where people do extreme things for money. Especially when the amount is this significant. After hearing those words, a deep fear settled in. Could Matthew really go that far? No, that's impossible. I've known him for 12 years. He can be calculating, selfish, but dangerous. Or had I been wrong about him all along? Well then, let's go over the plan, the lawyer said, leaning back in his chair. Here's what I suggest. First, you tell your husband you need time and stay with your friend. Second, you open a new bank account and transfer the money. Third, we prepare the divorce paperwork, but we won't file until your finances are fully secured. How does that sound? Sounds reasonable, I agreed. Great. Let's go over the details, Michael Thompson said, opening his laptop. I'll start preparing the necessary documents. We spent the next hour discussing legal specifics and filling out forms. By the time we left, I felt more grounded. At least now I had a plan, and someone in my corner who knew what they were doing. Afterward, Isabella and I stopped at a cafe. After all the stress, I just wanted to sit somewhere quiet, drink some tea, and gather my thoughts. Feeling any better? Isabella asked once we settled into a table by the window. A little, I admitted. At least I know now that Matthew has no legal claim to the inheritance. And I've got a plan. That's already a win, she nodded. So what are you going to say to Matthew? When will you talk to him? Tonight, probably, I sighed. The longer I wait, the more suspicious it'll seem. I'll call and say I need time to process my grandmother's death. That I want to be alone for a bit. And not a word about the inheritance, Isabella reminded me. Not a word, I said firmly. He can keep thinking I'm clueless. It's safer that way. Exactly, she nodded. And when will you open the new account? Tomorrow morning, I decided. I'll go while he's at work. The sooner the money's out of reach, the better I'll feel. We finished our tea, and I pulled out my phone. It was time to call Matthew. My heart was pounding, and my palms were sweaty. I never thought talking to my own husband would feel this terrifying. I took a deep breath and hit call. Victoria. Matthew's voice was frantic. Where are you? What's going on? Why didn't you come home? Matthew, my voice faltered. I paused to collect myself. I need some time. After my grandmother's death, I feel completely drained. I just want to be alone for a bit, to think. What do you mean, alone? His voice instantly turned irritated. You have a home. A husband. What are you even talking about? It's not nonsense, I said, doing my best to stay firm. It's my decision. I'll be staying at Isabella's for a few days, just until I get my head straight. At Isabella's? Now he sounded almost angry. Since when do you run everything by her instead of me? I'm your husband, Victoria. Exactly, I said, surprised by my own calm, which is why you should understand and support me. I just need some time, Matthew. A few days. That's all. There was silence on the line. I could almost hear him trying to hold himself back from lashing out. Fine, he said at last, his tone softening, almost pleading. I get it. You're upset. But can I at least see you? Bring you some of your stuff? You left with nothing. I hesitated. I did need my things, but facing him now, looking him in the eye, knowing what I knew, that was too much. No, that's okay, I said. Isabella has everything I need. I'll reach out in a couple of days. Victoria, this isn't like you, he said, his voice hardening again. What's really going on? Did someone put this idea in your head? Isabella didn't put anything in my head, I snapped, my patience thinning. I just need time alone. Is that really so hard to understand? How long are you planning to be alone? His suspicion was obvious. I don't know. A few days. Maybe a week, I replied, trying to stay calm even as I boiled inside. Is that really too much after 12 years of marriage? Another long pause. Then a deep sigh. Fine, Matthew said grudgingly. If you really need this. But just know I'll be waiting at home. And we need to talk, Victoria. About a lot of things. We will, I promised, already knowing that conversation would be very different from what he imagined. Thanks for understanding. I ended the call and exhaled, only then realizing I'd been sitting with my back completely stiff the entire time. Well? Isabella asked, having watched me the whole time. It went okay, I said, slipping the phone back into my bag. I doubt he really accepted it, but at least he didn't start yelling. That's something. He won't back off that easily, she said thoughtfully. Especially once he finds out about the money. Be ready, he might start watching you, trying to figure out what's going on. You really think he'd go that far? I asked, unsure. Victoria, you heard how he and his mother were plotting to trick you and steal your inheritance, Isabella reminded me. And that was before they even knew how much it was. Imagine what they'd be willing to do now. She was right. I'd spent too long clinging to illusions about my marriage, about love and loyalty from Matthew. It was time to face the truth and see him for who he really was. Most importantly, it was time to protect myself and what I'd inherited. You're right, I nodded with resolve. Tomorrow I'm opening a new account and transferring the money. Then I'm filing for divorce. No more pretending, no more fear, it's time to start a new life. Now that's what I like to hear. Isabella clapped her hands, smiling. Finally, I see the old Victoria, the bold, fearless girl who didn't let anyone push her around. I smiled despite myself, remembering who I used to be. It was true, there was a time when I didn't hesitate to take risks, speak up, stand for what I believed in. And then Matthew came along, and little by little, I'd turned into a quiet, obedient wife who let him make all the decisions. Funny how I hadn't noticed the shift. You know, Isabella, I said thoughtfully, maybe this inheritance isn't a curse. Maybe it's a blessing. A chance to start fresh. Exactly, she said, squeezing my hand. Now you've got a real shot at living life the way you want. On your own terms. No one to report to. No one to depend on. Suddenly, I felt a surge of energy and purpose. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was back in control of my life, like I was finally the one making the decisions. And it was exhilarating. Thank you, Isabella, I said sincerely. For everything. I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through this without you. That's what friends are for, she said with a warm smile. Now let's go home. It's been a long day, we both need rest. We returned to Isabella's place as dusk settled over the city. Her son Kevin had just come back from his grandmother's. 13, tall and lanky, with smart eyes and a shaggy mop of hair. He greeted me politely, giving his mom a curious look. She simply told him I'd be staying with them for a few days. Kevin nodded and disappeared into the living room, giving up his room to me and settling on the couch instead. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of cars outside. So much had happened in just 2 days. 2 days ago, my life was predictable. Teaching, a husband, plans for summer vacation. And now I was lying in a stranger's room, with $500,000 in my name, and the crushing realization that the man I'd spent 12 years with never really loved me. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from Matthew, can't sleep. Thinking about you. The house feels empty without you. Come home soon. I set the phone aside without replying. What was I supposed to say? That I couldn't sleep either, but for entirely different reasons. That I was never coming back to that house, or to him. Morning brought new tasks. After a quick breakfast, I headed downtown to Chase Bank, one Matthew would never think to check. All our shared accounts were with a smaller local bank near the house. The account setup took less than 30 minutes. As soon as the bank rep learned how much I planned to deposit, her demeanor shifted. She brought over a manager, a well-dressed man in his 40s, who offered me not just an account, but an entire suite of premium services, a personal advisor, an investment portfolio, and all sorts of features I'd only heard about in passing. That's quite a substantial amount, Miss Anderson, the manager said in a hushed, almost conspiratorial tone. It's important to manage it wisely, to protect it and make it grow. Here's what we can offer. I listened with half an ear, signing papers as he talked. Investing still felt too abstract, too distant. The priority right now was making sure the money was somewhere safe, where Matthew couldn't touch it. Here's your card, the manager said, handing me a sealed envelope. You'll receive the PIN via text. As soon as the funds hit the account, we'll contact you to discuss the next steps. I thanked him and stepped outside, feeling like I'd just crossed some invisible line. I still had to transfer the inheritance funds from the bank where the estate was settled, but that could be handled within the week. For now, I had a safe harbor. A new account only I and Isabella knew about. The next step was school. I needed to request leave, either medical or unpaid. There was no way I could stand in front of a class with everything that was swirling around in my head. The principal, Jennifer Roberts, a silver-haired woman with a sharp gaze and a kind heart, listened carefully as I explained I needed time off. Of course, Victoria, she said, looking me over thoughtfully. After losing someone close, you need time to heal. Take 2 weeks. There's hardly any time left in the semester anyway. Sandra Miller will finish up with your 9th graders, she already agreed to sub in. Thank you, Jennifer, I said gratefully. I really appreciate your understanding. You're one of our best teachers, she said with a warm smile. And I remember how hard it was for me when I lost my mom. Take all the time you need, Victoria. The job will still be here when you're ready. Walking out of the school, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I'd just shed another heavy burden. Now I could fully focus on the real issue, my marriage and my future. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Matthew again. This time, I decided to answer. Yeah, I said, my voice distant. Victoria, how are you? There was concern in his voice, so sincere that if I hadn't heard yesterday's conversation with his mother, I might have believed it. I've been worried. Maybe you could come home. Or I can come to you. No, Matthew, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle but firm. I really need some time. I've taken a leave from school. I want to sort out my grandma's affairs, get my head straight. Is there anything I can do to help? He asked, pressing. We could go through the inheritance stuff together. You know I'm always here for you. Thanks, but I've got it covered, I cut him off. The notary explained everything. It's all pretty straightforward. So, what exactly did she leave you? He asked casually. You haven't really said. The apartment. A few things. There it was. I'd been expecting that. Yes, the apartment, I said calmly. And a bit of savings. Nothing major. We'll talk about everything when I'm back, okay? Sure, he said, trying, and failing, to hide the disappointment in his voice. It's just. I thought we could make some plans. Maybe get a bigger place. You know I've wanted that for a long time. I know, I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. We'll talk. But not right now, okay? I have to go. Let's talk later tonight. I ended the call and let out a long breath. I had to admit, Matthew knew how to sound convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have melted at his concern. But now, every word he said rang false. Every caring gesture felt like part of a carefully rehearsed act. I spent the rest of the day handling logistics, finalizing the bank paperwork, talking to the company, finishing the renovation at my grandmother's apartment, checking in with the lawyer. By the time I got back to Isabella's that evening, I was tired, but I felt accomplished. So, any progress? Isabella asked, placing a bowl of fragrant soup in front of me. Yeah, I nodded. Accounts open, leave from school approved. I spoke with the contractors, they'll speed up the work on the apartment. I should be able to move in soon. What about Matthew? Isabella asked, watching me carefully. Did he call? Of course, I said with a wry smile. Playing the loving husband. Asking about the inheritance. And what did you tell him? That it's the apartment and some savings. Nothing specific. Do you think he bought it? I don't know, I admitted. He's pretending to believe it. He's just waiting for me to come home so we can talk. I don't like it, Isabella frowned. If he finds out about the $500,000, he might start putting things together. But how would he know? I shrugged. The notary won't say anything, it's confidential. You won't tell. I won't tell. No one else knows. What about the bank? Isabella tapped her spoon on the table. Are you sure he can't get access to your account info? I paused. Matthew could be persistent when he wanted something. And he had connections, friends, colleagues, people in different fields. What if he found a way to dig something up? That's why I opened the account at a different bank, I said. And tomorrow I'm transferring the funds. After that, I'll be ready to file for divorce. You sure you're ready? Isabella asked gently. It's a big step. I'm sure, I said firmly. After everything I've learned, staying married would be a lie. I deserve better, Isabella. We all do. We deserve more than being used by someone who only sees us as an opportunity. She nodded silently. Her eyes told me everything, she believed in me. And that gave me strength. That night, I dreamed of Grandma. She was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, an open book resting on her lap. Sunlight glowed on her silver hair, neatly tied up in a bun. Don't be afraid, Victoria, she said with her warm smile. You've got this. You've always been strong. I woke up with tears in my eyes, but my heart felt light. Grandma had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. She taught me the most important lesson of all: never give up, no matter how hard things get. And I wasn't about to let her down. In the morning, I got a text from the bank. The money had arrived. $500,000. A number that had seemed so unreal just days ago was now a simple line in a bank statement. I took a deep breath and started the transfer to the new account. The process took longer than I expected: forms to fill, identity checks, proof of funds. But by midday, it was done. The money was moved. The documents signed. And finally, I could breathe easy. My inheritance was safe. Leaving the bank, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I'd just taken off a heavy backpack after a long, exhausting hike. So, what now? Technically, I should have gone straight to the lawyer's office and started the divorce process. But something held me back. It wasn't fear, more like curiosity. I suddenly wanted to see how Matthew would act if I came home. Would I be able to spot the lies in his words and actions now that I knew the truth? Could he still pretend to be the loving husband, knowing I had money? It was a risky experiment. Isabella would definitely call it madness. But deep down, I felt like I needed to do this. To test myself. To see if I could trust my new instincts, my new view of the world and of relationships. I took out my phone and dialed Matthew's number. Victoria, he picked up after the first ring, like he'd been waiting. Is everything okay? Yeah, all good, I said, keeping my tone as natural as possible. I was thinking, maybe I should come home. We could talk. Of course, he said, and the joy in his voice sounded almost genuine. I'd be so happy. Should I come pick you up? Or are you taking a cab? I'll get there on my own, I said. I'll be home in a couple of hours. As soon as I hung up, I called Isabella and told her my plan. You've lost your mind, she said, clearly alarmed. Why would you go back? You already made your decision. I need to do this, Isabella, I said firmly. I need to see it with my own eyes. Hear what he says when the money comes up. And besides, I need to grab my things, my documents. You can buy new stuff, she argued. And you could have picked up the papers when he wasn't home. I know what I'm doing, I said confidently. The money's safe. The divorce is happening. I just need to close this chapter. Make sure I'm not wrong about him. Isabella sighed. Fine, she said reluctantly. But be careful. And keep your phone on you. If anything feels off, call me. Immediately. I promise, I smiled, touched by her concern. It's going to be okay, Isabella. I'm not the naive fool I used to be. The moment I walked into our apartment, I could feel that something had changed. Either in me or in the air itself. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. The photos on the wall, the couch where we watched movies, the kitchen where I used to cook for us, now it all felt like a movie set. Pretty, but fake. Matthew greeted me with open arms and a bouquet of freesia, my favorite flowers. But wait. How did he know that? I couldn't recall ever telling him. I'm so glad you're back, he said, helping me off with my coat. These past 2 days were hell. The house didn't feel like home without you. I smiled and nodded, watching him like an actress watching another actor from offstage. Every move, every word seemed rehearsed. Had I really never noticed how phony it all was? Or had I just not wanted to? I made dinner, Matthew said, leading me to the kitchen. On the table were plates of something that smelled really good. Your favorite, teriyaki chicken with mushrooms. There it was again, favorite. But I'd never told him that. In fact, I wasn't even that into mushrooms. It was his mother, Margaret Peterson, who loved this dish. She made it all the time when we visited. We sat down, and Matthew started asking about how I'd been feeling, how I'd spent the past few days. I kept my answers short, careful not to give away what I was really thinking. Then I decided to test my theory. You know, I've been thinking about Grandma's inheritance, I said casually, watching his face. Trying to figure out the best way to handle the money. Matthew perked up instantly, though he tried to mask it behind a look of polite curiosity. Yeah. So, how much did she leave you? Quite a bit, I replied vaguely. Grandma was always very careful with money. And she had some stocks that really increased in value over time. Stocks? He said, surprised. Your grandma invested in stocks? Believe it or not, I shrugged. She was a smart woman. And then there's the apartment, of course. I could sell it. Of course you should sell it, Matthew jumped in eagerly. Why do we need 2 places? We could buy one really nice apartment, in a good neighborhood. You know I've always wanted that. I made a mental note of that. In his mind, Grandma's apartment was already ours, even though legally, it was mine alone. I haven't decided yet, I said, sipping my water. Maybe I'll rent it out. That way I'd have steady monthly income. Rent it? He frowned. Why deal with tenants and all the headaches? Better to sell and invest the money in something real. By the way, how much is the apartment worth? The realtor estimated around $200,000, I said, watching his pupils dilate. But that's just a ballpark. $200,000. Matthew whistled. Not bad. And the rest of the money? You mentioned the stocks. Yeah, that's about the same amount, I said, deliberately understating the real number. So altogether, about $400,000. Matthew calculated quickly. That's a small fortune. We could. He stopped mid-sentence when he noticed my expression and corrected himself. I mean, you could do a lot with that. But you need someone who understands finances. And that someone is you, I said, unable to keep a note of sarcasm out of my voice. Well, I'm not an expert or anything, Matthew said, looking modest. But I have a friend in an investment firm. He could give you some solid advice. Or we could go to the bank, open a joint account. There it was. Exactly what he and his mother had talked about, a joint account he could access freely. I've already opened an account, I said calmly. And I've consulted with a financial advisor. What? Matthew couldn't hide his irritation. When did you even do that? And why didn't you talk to me about it? I'm your husband, Victoria. That's exactly why I didn't want to bother you with it, I replied sweetly. You've already got enough on your plate. He stared at me, confused and clearly annoyed. This wasn't the conversation he had expected. You've changed, he finally said. We used to make decisions together. Did we? I tilted my head. Because I remember just agreeing to everything you suggested. That's not quite the same, is it? Matthew didn't know what to say. The script he'd prepared was falling apart. Look, Victoria, he leaned in, taking my hands in his. I get it, you're going through a tough time. Losing your grandmother, inheriting money out of the blue, it's overwhelming. But we've always been a team, right? Let's figure this out together. His words sounded so genuine, so sincere. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him. But now I saw everything so clearly, how smoothly he manipulated, how he used guilt, how effortlessly he steered the conversation to exactly where he wanted it. You know what, Matthew, I gently pulled my hands away, I'm really tired. Let's talk about this tomorrow, okay? I need a shower and some rest. He couldn't quite hide his disappointment, but nodded with fake understanding. Of course, get some rest. Like your grandma used to say, things always look better in the morning. I got up and went to the bathroom, feeling his eyes on my back. The experiment was a success. I'd seen everything I needed to see. Matthew hadn't changed. I was just finally seeing him for who he really was, without the rose-colored glasses. After my shower, I crawled into our shared bed and turned to face the wall. Matthew came in later and tried to wrap his arm around me, but I pretended to be asleep. I lay there with my eyes open in the dark, listening to his breathing, thinking about how strange life was. Just a week ago, I would have welcomed his touch. Now, all I felt was disgust and the desperate need to end this charade. In the morning, once Matthew left for work, I quickly packed the essentials, documents, clothes, what little I truly needed. I called Isabella and filled her in briefly. Then I dialed my lawyer. Michael Thompson, good morning. I'm ready to file for divorce. Today. As I walked out of the apartment, the place where I had lived for 12 years, I turned to look at the door one last time. I didn't feel sadness or regret. Just relief. And a strange sense of freedom. I walked down the stairs and out into the street, where a taxi was waiting. A new day, a new life. One without lies and manipulation. One where I was finally in charge. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother-in-law. I smiled and turned the phone off. That conversation could wait. I had more important things to do. Victoria Anderson, Michael Thompson was saying as he sorted through papers in his office. Under Illinois law, once the divorce petition is filed, the court grants a reconciliation period. In your case, we'll list irreconcilable differences and the fact that you've been living apart. How long will it take? I couldn't hide my impatience. Is there any way to speed it up? In Illinois, the process can take several months to a year, depending on the circumstances, he said with a shrug. But the good news is, during this period, your husband can't lay claim to your inheritance, as long as you don't mix any finances. I sighed. Several months. That felt like an eternity when you had to constantly look over your shoulder. But I had no choice. All right, let's file the papers, I said firmly. I want this to be official. Great, Michael nodded. Sign here and here. When the paperwork was done, I felt a strange lightness. The first step was behind me. There was no going back now. And now something important, he said, leaning forward. Where are you staying? At a friend's place, I replied. But I'm planning to move into my grandmother's apartment soon, the renovation is almost finished. Good. Just be careful. Once your husband gets the notice, he may react unpredictably. Especially if he finds out how much money is actually involved. You think he might find out? I asked, a flicker of anxiety in my voice. Banks are full of people, Victoria, the lawyer said seriously. And not all of them are saints when it comes to confidentiality, especially where large sums are concerned. I remembered the look on the bank clerk's face as he saw the balance. That barely concealed surprise. What if Matthew managed to get someone to talk? What should I do? I asked, unsure for the first time. For starters, change all your passwords. Email, online banking, social media. Enable two-factor authentication wherever possible. Don't use shared devices or connect to unsecured Wi-Fi. I nodded, committing it all to memory. I never imagined divorce would feel like a covert operation. And one more thing, he said, lowering his voice, be prepared for emotional manipulation. Pleas for forgiveness, promises to change, reminders of the good times. That's standard when money's on the line. I understand, I said calmly, though deep down I wasn't sure I'd be strong enough to resist. 12 years together isn't a joke. I left the office and decided to walk to the subway. I needed air. Time to clear my head. The day was sunny but chilly, classic April in Chicago, with winter still holding on. My phone buzzed. Matthew. I declined the call. Seconds later, a message came in, where are you? I came home for lunch and you're gone. Are you okay? I didn't reply. Let him start getting used to the idea that he no longer controls every move I make. A few minutes later, another message, I called the school. They said you're on leave. What's going on? Please answer me. That was too much. He called the school. Trying to track me down. This wasn't concern, it was control. How had I not seen it before? I quickly typed, I'm fine. We need to talk. I'll be home tonight. His response came instantly, okay. I'll be waiting. I love you. I love you. Those words used to make my heart skip. Now, they just made me smile bitterly. By evening, I returned to what was now his apartment. Matthew greeted me with a worried look that almost seemed real. Victoria, what's going on? He asked the moment I stepped inside. You disappear, don't answer your phone, talk in riddles. I'm going crazy here. We need to talk, I said, walking into the living room and sitting down on the couch, keeping my distance. I filed for divorce, Matthew. He froze, like I'd just struck him. A storm of emotions crossed his face, disbelief, shock, hurt, anger. What? He finally choked out. Divorce? Victoria, are you out of your mind? What's happening? I heard everything, I said calmly, looking him straight in the eyes. Your conversation with your mother, the day I got back from the notary. About how you two planned to trick me and get your hands on my grandmother's inheritance. Matthew went pale. For a second, he was speechless. Then he tried to collect himself. Victoria, you misunderstood, he began. We were just... Don't bother, I raised my hand, cutting him off. I heard every word. About the joint account. About how you married me because I'm easy and you can do whatever you want. About how I still believe in all that nonsense, love, honesty, loyalty. He sat down across from me, head bowed like a scolded schoolboy. It was just a conversation, he muttered. My mom says dumb stuff all the time, you know that. I was just agreeing with her to keep the peace. Really? I scoffed. That's why you kept pressing me about the inheritance. Why you suggested a joint account. Why you insisted on selling my grandmother's apartment. He was silent, unable to come up with an excuse. For the first time in 12 years, I saw him like this, cornered, exposed, speechless. How much? He suddenly asked, lifting his eyes to mine. How much did she really leave you? There it was. Even now, with everything falling apart, all he cared about was the money. None of your business, I said coldly. It's my inheritance, and it's staying mine. I've already made sure of that. What do you mean? He asked, fear creeping into his voice. I transferred the money to an account you can't touch, I explained calmly. And I filed for divorce stating the inheritance is my personal property and not subject to division. You can't do that, Matthew snapped, jumping to his feet. We've been married 12 years. I have rights. No, you don't, I said, standing too, anger rising in my chest. Not to my inheritance. Not to me. He stood there, clenching and unclenching his fists. There was something dangerous in his eyes, something animalistic. For a moment, I felt a twinge of fear. What if he tried to force me to sign something? What if? I wouldn't do anything stupid if I were you, I warned, backing toward the door. My lawyer knows where I am. So will the police if anything happens to me. You threatening me now? He growled. Seriously, Victoria? After everything I've done for you? What exactly have you done for me, Matthew? I asked quietly. Married me for convenience. Pretended to love me while it served your interests. Plotted to screw me over the moment money came into play. He didn't answer. Just turned to the window, shoulders hunched, back tense. For a brief second, I almost pitied him, a man who valued money over real connection. I'm taking my stuff and my documents, I said, moving toward the closet. And I'm not coming back. I own a quarter of this place. You can buy me out or we can sell and split it. Your call. Victoria, please, he turned around, desperation on his face. Let's talk. I admit I was wrong. Yes, I was curious about the inheritance, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. 12 years isn't nothing. We had good times, remember? Cape Cod for our first anniversary, your birthday last year. I packed in silence, trying not to listen. The lawyer was right, the manipulation started immediately. Memories, apologies, promises. We can start over, Matthew pleaded, following me around the room. I'll prove to you that I love you. We'll buy that house you've always wanted. Travel. Victoria, please, just give me a chance. A chance for what? I stopped and looked him in the eyes. To come up with a better plan to steal my money. No, Matthew. It's over. I don't believe a single word you say anymore. His expression changed in an instant. The mask of remorse slipped. And there he was, the real Matthew. Cold. Calculating. Angry. You'll regret this, he hissed. You think you can just walk away? After everything I put into this marriage? I let out a bitter laugh. What exactly did you put in, Matthew? Fake concern. Phony affection. Schemes to take what was never yours. He took a step toward me, looming over me threateningly. My heart raced with fear, but I didn't back down. Don't come any closer, I said firmly. Or I'll call the police. Matthew froze, glaring at me with pure hatred. Then he slowly stepped back. Take your stuff and go, he muttered, turning away. But this isn't over, Victoria. You have no idea what you've started. I packed only the essentials, clothes, documents, a few sentimental things. Everything else could be replaced. Before leaving, I glanced around the apartment that had been my home for so many years. Strangely, I didn't feel sadness or regret. Just relief. And a strange sense of freedom. Goodbye, Matthew, I said, my hand on the doorknob. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But it won't be me, or my money. He didn't respond. Just stood by the window, his face like stone. I stepped out, quietly shutting the door behind me. I walked down the stairs, stepped outside, and took a deep breath, like I'd finally dropped a backpack I'd been dragging for years. The taxi arrived 5 minutes later. Isabella was already waiting for me at her place, with hot tea and a promise of support. Well? How did it go? She asked as I walked in. As expected, I said with a tired smile. First the excuses, then the begging, and finally the threats. Classic. Do you think he might actually do something? Her voice was laced with concern. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm not afraid anymore. Whatever happens, I'll handle it. That night, for the first time in a long while, I slept peacefully, no nightmares, no anxious thoughts. The next morning, my lawyer called. The divorce paperwork had been officially filed. Now, it was just a matter of waiting a few months. In the meantime, Michael Thompson said, I recommend moving into your grandmother's place as soon as possible. The less your husband knows about your whereabouts, the better. I agreed. The renovation on her apartment would be done in a week. I could move in and finally start over. A life without lies and manipulation. But fate had one more nasty surprise in store. That evening, I got a call from Robert Stevens, the foreman overseeing the renovation. Victoria Anderson, we've got a problem, he said, clearly rattled. The apartment's flooded. Looks like someone deliberately opened all the faucets. The damage is bad. I froze, a chill running through me. Could Matthew really have done this? But how did he find the address? How did he even get in? I'm on my way, I said, ending the call. What's wrong? Isabella asked, alarmed by my expression. Grandma's apartment was flooded, I said as I dialed my lawyer. I think Matthew's behind it. Oh my God, she gasped. He really is capable of anything. But how did he find out where it is? I don't know, I shrugged. Maybe he followed me. Maybe he paid someone on the crew. Doesn't matter. What matters is, he's escalating. And this is just the beginning. Michael Thompson answered on the second ring. Victoria Anderson, what's happened? Looks like the war has started, I said, feeling an eerie calm. And I'm ready to win it. My grandmother's apartment, once warm and full of life, now looked like a disaster zone. The wood floors were warped, wallpaper peeling off, dark stains streaking down from the ceiling. Evidence of the flooding. The crew stood around, clearly overwhelmed, not sure where to begin. The neighbors downstairs are furious, Robert said grimly. They're threatening to sue if the damage isn't covered. I told them it wasn't your fault, but you know how people can be. I nodded silently, taking in the wreckage. But my thoughts weren't on the money it would take to fix it, or even on Matthew, who was most likely behind this. I was thinking about Grandma. What would she say if she saw what had become of her beloved home? A place where every item had a story, a meaning. Robert Stevens, can you show me exactly how the flooding happened? I asked, trying to collect my thoughts. Come with me, he said, leading me to the bathroom. Look here. Faucets were turned all the way on. Water must have been running for hours. But that's not all. He pointed to the drain, stuffed with a rag. Someone blocked the drain on purpose, to cause maximum damage. And one more thing, he took me to the front door. The lock wasn't forced. Whoever did this had a key. A key. Matthew never had one to Grandma's apartment. But he had plenty of time and chances to copy mine, like when I brought it home after the funeral. This wasn't an accident, Robert said firmly. We shut off the water every time we leave. And we double-check. Someone came in after us. You're right, I sighed heavily. This wasn't an accident. It was personal. Robert gave a knowing nod, asking no further questions. A man who's clearly seen things in his line of work. What do we do now, Victoria Anderson? He asked after a pause. We'll have to start from scratch, new floors, stripping wallpaper, patching, painting. How long will it take? At least a month, working fast. Not counting the time to fully dry everything out. A month. Just enough time for the mandatory reconciliation period in the divorce process to end. Coincidence? Hardly. All right, I said firmly. Get started. And also, we need to change all the locks. Every single one. And install a proper security system. Smart move, Robert Stevens nodded approvingly. I can recommend a solid security company. Worked with them before, they're reliable. As we went over the new renovation plans, the doorbell rang. A middle-aged man in a suit stood on the threshold, holding a folder of documents. Victoria Anderson? He asked in a formal tone. Yes, that's me, I replied cautiously. Detective Johnson, Cook County Police Department, he said, flashing his badge. There's been a report of potential inheritance fraud. I need to ask you a few questions. My stomach dropped. Fraud? What the hell was he talking about? Come in, I said, stepping aside to let him in. Just so you know, there's been some flooding. I can see that, Johnson said, scanning the damage. Unfortunate timing, or maybe not. There was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. He clearly knew more than he was letting on. Let's sit in the kitchen, I offered. It's the only place that wasn't completely soaked. We sat at the small old-fashioned table that had somehow survived the flood. My grandmother's vintage set, I'd been planning to replace it. All right, the detective said, opening his folder. Your husband, Matthew Anderson, filed a report claiming you forged your grandmother Eleanor Grace's will to illegally claim her assets. What? I couldn't hide my outrage. That's ridiculous. The will was done properly and notarized. Most likely, Johnson nodded calmly. But we're required to follow up on any formal report, especially when large sums are involved. He said the last part with emphasis, watching me closely. I kept my expression steady. The will was legal and notarized, I repeated. The notary can confirm its authenticity. As for my husband's claim, we're in the middle of a divorce. This is probably just his way of getting back at me. Divorce? Johnson jotted something in his notebook. Interesting. When did you file? Right after I overheard him and his mother plotting to deceive me and steal my inheritance, I said, firmly. The detective raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? I overheard their conversation, I replied. They didn't know I was standing by the door. I see, Johnson nodded, scribbling again. What about the flooding? Do you have reason to believe your husband was involved? I do, I said without hesitation. He was furious when he found out I filed for divorce and moved the inheritance to an account he couldn't touch. He threatened me, said I'd regret it. And now, I motioned to the wrecked apartment around us. Do you have any proof that he did this? No, I admitted with a sigh. But the lock wasn't broken, which means whoever did this had a key. And until recently, I kept the only key at our shared home. Johnson tapped his pen against his notebook thoughtfully. You know, Victoria, he finally said, I handle a lot of cases involving family disputes. They often look just like this. Accusations, revenge, sabotage. Especially when big money's involved. I get how it must look from the outside, I said. But I'm telling the truth. My grandmother left me that inheritance, and my husband tried to take it. Now that he's failed, he's trying to destroy me. Maybe, Johnson closed the notebook. I'll verify the will with the notary. If it checks out, you've got nothing to worry about. As for the flooding, without solid evidence, there's not much we can do. I understand, I nodded. Can I ask something? Why are you handling this? Most family stuff doesn't get a detective assigned. For the first time, he smiled faintly. Usually, no. But when $500,000 is involved, things get more attention. My body tensed. How do you know the exact amount? That's confidential. Your husband mentioned it in his statement, the detective said with a shrug. He seems to know quite a bit about the inheritance. That was strange. I'd never told Matthew the exact number. Only mentioned it was around 400,000. How did he know it was 5? Well, I'll leave you to it, Johnson said, standing. I'll be in touch. And Victoria, be careful. Family drama like this can take an ugly turn. After he left, I called my lawyer and filled him in. Don't worry, Victoria, Michael Thompson assured me. The will was prepared correctly. No investigation will find any issues. As for the flooding, yes, without evidence, it's tricky. But we can file a counterclaim against your husband for defamation and attempting to damage your reputation. Do you think that's wise? I asked, unsure. Won't it just make him angrier? Honestly, judging by what he's already done, I don't think he needs another reason, the lawyer said dryly. But it's important to show you won't just sit back and take it. It might make him think twice before escalating further. I agreed. If Matthew wanted a war, he'd get one, but not on his terms. Back at Isabella's, I told her everything. What a piece of work, she said, furious. Floods your apartment and then accuses you of fraud. He's got no shame. What bothers me more is how he found out the exact amount, I said, frowning. I never told him. Maybe he's got someone at the bank, Isabella suggested. Or in the notary's office. You said it yourself, he's got connections. It was totally possible. Matthew always knew how to find the right people. Favors, deals, leverage, that was his thing. Either way, I said, we need to be ready. He's not done. This is just the beginning. And I was right. The next day, when I went to the bank to check my account, I got hit with another unpleasant surprise. I'm very sorry, Victoria, the manager said, nervously flipping through papers. But your account has been temporarily frozen due to a review of the fund's origin. It's standard procedure for large sums. Standard procedure? I asked, trying to stay calm as anger bubbled inside me. Or did someone push for that procedure to happen right now? He looked away, clearly uncomfortable. I can't comment on that, he said vaguely. But if your documents are all in order, the freeze should be lifted soon. And until then, I can't access a single dollar. Not even a small amount. Unfortunately, no, he said, spreading his hands. Those are the rules. But I can offer you a credit card with very favorable terms. I refused the offer and walked out of the bank, immediately calling my lawyer. He froze my account, I said angrily as soon as Michael Thompson picked up. I can't access my own money. Stay calm, Victoria, he replied with confidence. This is a standard procedure during a financial review. We'll submit all the documents proving the legitimacy of the inheritance, and the freeze will be lifted. It's just a matter of a few days, a week at most. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? I felt cornered. I barely have any cash left. How much do you have on you? Michael asked practically. About $400 in cash, I said. And another $600 from what I withdrew earlier. That should cover you for a week or two, he reasoned. If it's not enough, I can lend you some. The important thing is to stay calm and stick to the plan. After talking to him, I felt a little better. Yes, Matthew was hitting me from every angle, but every hit could be countered. I just had to stay strong and not let him see me break. That evening, my mother-in-law called. For the first time since I left Matthew. Victoria, what are you doing? Margaret Peterson snapped without even a greeting. Why did you file for divorce? Why are you spreading rumors that Matthew tried to scam you? Don't you realize you're tearing this family apart? Hello, Margaret, I replied calmly. I'm not tearing anything apart. The family fell apart the moment you and your son started plotting how to steal my inheritance. That's nonsense, she barked. No one was trying to take anything from you. We were just discussing how to best manage the money. You're a family, everything is supposed to be shared. Really? I couldn't stop the sarcasm. So Matthew's saying he married me because I was easy to deal with, and he could do whatever he wanted. Is that part of your idea of family values too? There was silence on the line. When she finally spoke again, her tone had shifted from indignant to pleading. Listen, Victoria, she said. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe Matthew said things he didn't mean. But 12 years of marriage, that's not nothing. Are you really going to throw all of that away over one conversation? Not over a conversation, I said firmly. Over the lies. Over the fact that our entire marriage was a sham. And over what's happening now, the flooded apartment, false accusations, a frozen bank account. You think that's all just coincidence? I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice faltering. Matthew is heartbroken. He loves you, Victoria. Give him a chance to make things right. Make what right? Forge my signature on some papers? Fake a love story while he drains my accounts? No thanks. My voice stayed calm, but I was burning inside. Tell Matthew that if he doesn't stop, I'll sue him for defamation and property damage. And Margaret, don't call me again. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Enough. I'd let them use me and control me for far too long. It was time to take back control. The next day, I met with the private investigator my lawyer had recommended. Daniel Rodriguez was a short, stocky man with sharp eyes. He listened to my story without interrupting. So you want to know how your husband found out the exact amount of your inheritance and how he managed the flooding, he clarified when I finished. Yes, I nodded. And I want to know who helped him freeze my account, if we can prove he was behind that too. I understand, he said, tapping his fingers on the table thoughtfully. It won't be quick or cheap, Victoria. Investigations like this take time and resources. Money's not a problem, I said confidently. The account will be unfrozen in a week or two. All right, Daniel nodded. Then let's get started. I'll be in touch as soon as I have something. A week passed. My account was still frozen, despite my lawyer's best efforts. The repairs in my grandmother's apartment were dragging on, the warped floors had to be replaced completely. I was still staying with Isabella and feeling increasingly guilty for the trouble I was causing. "Stop apologizing," she waved me off. "You do the same for me. Plus, Kevin loves having you here. Says you explain literature way better than his teacher." That was true. In the evenings, I helped Kevin with his homework, especially literature. It distracted me from the stress and made me miss teaching more than I'd expected. On Friday night, the detective called. "I've got something, Victoria," he said. "Let's meet in person. It's better not to talk over the phone." We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. Daniel Rodriguez looked smug, like a cat who'd just raided the cream. "I found out who leaked your inheritance info," he said as soon as the waitress left with our order. "A notary assistant. Young woman named Ashley. She's dating one of your husband's friends, Stephen Clark." That's how the info got to Matthew. Stephen Clark. I tried to recall. I don't remember anyone by that name. They met recently, Daniel explained. Clark works at the bank where your account is. He's likely the one who helped with the freeze. Of course. Classic Matthew, find the right person in the right place. What about the flooding? I asked. That's trickier, but I found something interesting. Daniel lowered his voice. The neighbor across the hall has a security camera pointed at the entrance. She installed it after a few burglaries in the area. And on the footage from that day, you can see a man who looks a lot like your husband entering the building about an hour before the flood was discovered. You have the footage. I leaned forward. I do, he said, pulling a USB drive from his bag. The quality isn't perfect, but the face is visible. I think it's enough to take to the police. I took the drive, a spark of justice flaring in my chest. Thank you, Daniel. You have no idea how much this means to me. Glad to help, he smiled. You know, Victoria, in my line of work, I've seen all kinds of stories. Sadly, yours isn't even the worst. People change when money's involved, even the ones closest to us. I nodded sadly. It was a bitter truth. The next day, I handed the flash drive to my lawyer, and we went to the police together. The footage wasn't perfect, but you could still recognize Matthew, his posture, his walk, his profile. This is enough to open a case, Michael Thompson said confidently. Especially with your testimony and the foreman's statement that there were no signs of forced entry. The police accepted the report, though I wasn't expecting much. Cases like this rarely went to court. But the point was to show Matthew that I wasn't helpless, and I was ready to fight. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Victoria. Matthew's voice was tense. We need to talk. Now. There's nothing to discuss, I replied coldly. Our lawyers will handle everything. You filed a police report, he growled. Accused me of property damage. Did I lie? I said calmly. There's surveillance footage, Matthew. You were seen entering the building an hour before the flood was discovered. Silence. Then his tone changed, lower, darker, almost threatening. You have no idea what you've started, Victoria. I didn't want it to come to this, but you're leaving me no choice. Either we settle this peacefully, or what? I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Are you threatening me? I'm just warning you, he said evasively. I have proof too. Proof that you forged your grandmother's will. That's ridiculous, I snapped. The will was legally processed and notarized. Notaries make mistakes, Matthew sneered. Especially when dealing with highly professional forgeries. And your grandmother wasn't exactly all there in her final months, she could have signed anything. That's a lie, I said, barely containing my anger. She was sharp and lucid until the very end. "That's your word against mine," Matthew countered. "And I've got witnesses ready to say Eleanor Grace had memory problems and wasn't thinking clearly. Including her doctor." I froze. It was true. Grandma had seen a neurologist in her last year. She'd complained about headaches. But she never had memory issues. Or maybe she did, and I missed it. "What do you want, Matthew?" I asked, exhausted. "A reasonable compromise," he said, switching to his businesslike tone. "You dropped the police complaint, I dropped mine about fraud. We settle the property division, say, 70% to you, 30% to me. We walk away peacefully. Everyone wins. 30% of $500,000. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want $150,000 for nothing." "For 12 years of marriage," Matthew corrected. "Call it compensation for time and emotional distress." "You're not getting a cent," I snapped. "You have no legal claim to my inheritance. Threaten me all you want, I'm not afraid." "You should be," he said coldly. "You've got until Monday. After that, it's too late." He hung up, and I sat there holding the phone, emotions crashing over me, anger, fear, confusion. A part of me wanted to give in, just to end this nightmare. But the part of me that had grown stronger these past weeks wasn't backing down. I called my lawyer and told him everything. "Don't let him intimidate you," Michael said firmly. "This is textbook pressure. He has no real evidence because the will is legitimate. But we do have evidence of him flooding the apartment. Stick to the plan, you'll be fine." Easier said than done. All evening I couldn't focus, replaying the conversation with Matthew over and over. What if he really found a way to challenge the will? What if someone lied about Grandma's mental state? That night, I dreamed of her again. She stood by the window in her apartment, looking at me with a gentle smile. "Don't be afraid, Victoria," she said. "The truth always finds its way. And you're stronger than you think." I woke up with an unexpected sense of peace. Grandma had been right, I was stronger than I thought. And I wasn't backing down. On Monday, I received a message from the bank. My account had been unfrozen. The investigation confirmed the inheritance was legitimate. At the same time, Michael Thompson informed me that the police had officially launched an investigation into the apartment flooding and had serious suspicions about Matthew. "The net is closing in," my lawyer said with satisfaction. "Now he's in a much weaker position than you. If he's found guilty of intentional property damage, it could significantly affect the divorce proceedings." That evening, I got a call from my mother-in-law. "Victoria, what's going on?" Margaret Peterson's voice was laced with panic. "Matthew's in trouble with the police. They've called him in for questioning." "What did you do?" "Me?" I said, offended. "I wasn't the one who flooded my grandmother's apartment or filed a false fraud claim." "You don't understand what you're doing," she pleaded. "Matthew could get a criminal record. That would ruin his career." "He should have thought about that," I said firmly. "Before he decided to get revenge because I didn't let him scam me." "Listen," she lowered her voice like someone might be listening, "Matthew's not himself lately. Ever since you left, he's been spiraling. I'm worried about him. And about you, too." There was real concern in her voice, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She was still a mother, after all, worried about her son, even one like Matthew. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "Let's all meet," she said quickly. "You, me, and Matthew. We'll talk like adults. Try to find a compromise." I hesitated. The idea of seeing Matthew didn't thrill me. But maybe, just maybe, it was a chance to finally settle things once and for all. Fine, I said at last. Let's meet. But not at your place, and not at his. Neutral ground. A cafe. Of course, Margaret said with relief. You pick the place. We agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe near the Chicago station. Busy enough that Matthew wouldn't try anything stupid. Before going, I called both my lawyer and the private investigator. Neither of them liked the idea, but they understood my wish to end the conflict peacefully. Just don't go alone, Michael Thompson insisted. Take a friend, or, actually, I'll be nearby myself. Not at your table, but close enough to step in if anything goes wrong. I agreed, though I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Something told me this meeting wouldn't be simple. The cafe was half empty when I arrived. Too late for breakfast, too early for lunch. I took a seat by the window, ordered tea, and waited. Michael sat one table over, pretending to be engrossed in his laptop. Margaret showed up first, jittery and scanning the room. Matthew followed behind her, looking worse than I remembered, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Margaret began as soon as they sat down. I think we all need to calm down and find a reasonable solution. I nodded silently, keeping my eyes on Matthew. He avoided eye contact, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Victoria, he finally spoke, I was wrong. What I did, it was inexcusable. The apartment, the report, everything. I was just so angry when you left. His apology sounded forced, but I played along. So what now? I asked. What are you offering? Let's just forget this nightmare, Margaret cut in. Matthew will drop his claim, you'll drop yours. You get divorced quietly, no drama. And, she hesitated, glancing at her son. I won't touch your inheritance, Matthew finished. Not a cent. I swear. That caught me off guard. I looked him in the eye, trying to see if he meant it. Something about his expression made me uneasy. Why the sudden change of heart? I asked. Just yesterday, you wanted 30%. I've had time to think, he said, eyes lowered. Realized money's not worth ruining my life. I could get into serious trouble over the flooding. I just want this to be over. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Too perfect. I smelled a trap, but couldn't figure out what it was. What about the apartment? I asked. Are you okay with selling it and splitting the proceeds? Yes, Matthew nodded quickly. Whatever it takes to end this war. And you're not going to stalk me, threaten me, try to get revenge. I swear, he raised his hand like taking an oath. No more games. We walk away like civilized people. I paused. The offer sounded too good to be true. But maybe, just maybe, he had realized how far he'd gone. Maybe this was my chance to end the madness without more pain. All right, I said slowly. I'll think about your offer. But before I agree to anything, I need to talk to my lawyer. Of course, Matthew nodded. I get it. Margaret looked genuinely pleased. That's wonderful, she chirped. I told you two could work it out. 12 years of marriage means something. The meeting dragged on for another half hour. We talked through divorce terms, asset division, timelines. But the whole time, something felt off. Matthew was too agreeable, too quick to say yes to everything. That wasn't like him at all. As we were saying goodbye, he suddenly reached out and took my hand. Thank you, Victoria, he said softly. For everything. There was something in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't guilt or gratitude, it was triumph. After they left, my lawyer came over to my table. So, did you reach an agreement? He asked. Sort of, I replied, still uneasy. Matthew agreed to everything. No claims to the inheritance, a peaceful divorce, splitting the apartment. Too good to be true, Michael Thompson said thoughtfully. Don't trust him, Victoria. People don't change overnight. Especially not people like your husband. I don't trust him, I admitted. Something feels off. But I can't figure out what. I don't know either, he said, rubbing his chin. Just be careful. And don't sign anything without running it by me first. That evening, the detective called. Victoria, I found out something interesting, Daniel Rodriguez said without preamble. Your husband met with a man named Victor Parker today. Do you know him? No, I said tensely. Who is he? Former cop. Now works in, let's say, less than legal activities, the detective said carefully. He has a certain reputation. People hire him to solve problems using unconventional methods. I went cold inside. You think Matthew wants to? I couldn't even finish the sentence. I'm not saying anything, Daniel replied quickly. Just be extremely cautious. Don't go anywhere alone, avoid isolated places, don't open the door to strangers. And honestly, you might want to stay somewhere else for a while. That call scared me more than anything so far. Was Matthew really capable of? No. That couldn't be. He could be vengeful, selfish, but not that. Or maybe I'd underestimated him again. I decided to move into a hotel for a few days until things settled. Isabella insisted I stay with her, but I didn't want to put her or Kevin at risk. The next day, I got a call from Detective Johnson. Victoria, we've got new developments in the flooding case, he said. Your husband confessed and agreed to pay for the damages. With that, the case might be closed without formal charges. He confessed. I couldn't believe it. Yes, Johnson confirmed. He expressed sincere remorse. Said he acted out of emotional distress after you left. It didn't add up. First, the peaceful divorce offer. Now a confession. What was Matthew really planning? I got my answer the next day, after returning to the hotel from a meeting with my lawyer. The room felt oddly cold. I turned on the light, and froze in horror. There was a large stuffed bear lying on the bed. The exact same kind I'd had as a child. Next to it was a photo of my parents, one I always kept in my wallet. But the most terrifying part was the mirror. Someone had drawn a large question mark on it with lipstick. Someone had been in my room. Someone who knew personal things about me, my past. And they'd left a clear message. Hands trembling, I called the detective. Victoria, don't touch anything, Daniel Rodriguez said urgently. I'm calling the police now and heading over. Wait for me in the hotel lobby, don't go back into the room. I stood there frozen, paralyzed by fear. Someone had gone through my things, touched items that meant something deeply personal. That bear, it was an exact replica of the one my dad gave me for my 6th birthday, just months before he died. How could Matthew possibly know about it? I'd never told him. Forcing myself to move, I left the room and went down to the lobby. The front desk clerk looked at me in surprise. Are you okay? He asked. No, I said, my voice shaking. Someone's been in my room. Please call the police. The officers arrived quickly. They examined the room, dusted for fingerprints on the mirror and door handles, and took my statement. I told them everything, about my conflict with Matthew, his threats, his meeting with Parker. A young sergeant took notes with a blank expression, neither sympathetic nor curious. Are you sure it was your husband? He asked when I finished. There were no signs of forced entry. And the cleaning staff said they didn't let anyone in. I don't know how he got in, I said honestly. But who else would do this? Who else would want to scare me like this? By the time Daniel Rodriguez arrived, the police were wrapping up. He spoke briefly with the officers, then pulled me aside. You can't stay here, he said firmly. If they found where you're staying, they could be watching you. We need to move you right away. But where will I go? I asked, overwhelmed. I know someone who rents out apartments short-term, he replied. No paperwork, cash only. Completely off the radar. Just until we figure out what's going on. I agreed, feeling like I was suddenly living in a spy thriller. I quickly packed my bags, paid for the unused nights, and slipped out through the service entrance, where Daniel had a cab waiting. Don't use your cell phone for now, he said as we drove. It can be tracked. Here, use this. He handed me a simple flip phone. Use this temporarily. My number's already saved in it. I nodded mechanically, still in shock. How was this even possible? Had Matthew really lost it over money, to the point of, what? Scaring me? Or something worse? The apartment Daniel brought me to was a small one-bedroom on the edge of town, in an old high-rise building. It was modest, sparsely furnished, but clean and neat. Make yourself at home, Daniel Rodriguez said. There's food in the fridge, clean sheets, solid locks, and quiet neighbors. No one's going to find you here. Thanks, I said, sinking onto the couch. So what now? Now we move fast, he said, taking a seat across from me. I think we have 2, maybe 3 days before they realize you've vanished. In that time, we need to gather enough evidence to press charges against your husband for stalking and making threats. How? I felt completely helpless. I'm going to try and find out exactly what Matthew asked Parker to do. There's a chance he just wanted to scare you and not actually hurt you. But we can't take that risk, Daniel said, as calmly as if we were discussing a business meeting, like my life wasn't possibly in danger. After he left, I was alone in a strange apartment. Oddly, I wasn't afraid. Just drained, completely empty. Everything that had happened over the past few weeks had wrung every drop of emotion out of me. I lay down on the stiff couch without even undressing and, to my surprise, fell into a deep sleep. I woke up to the ringtone of the flip phone Daniel had given me. Victoria, Michael Thompson's voice was tense. Daniel told me you had to relocate urgently. What happened? I briefly explained. That's outrageous, he said angrily. We're filing charges for stalking and threats immediately. We have witnesses confirming Matthew met with Parker, surveillance footage from the hotel, fingerprint analysis. That should be enough for the police to open a criminal case. And if it's not enough? I asked, exhausted. What if he slips away again? Then we'll go after him with a civil suit, Michael said firmly. Right now, your safety is the priority. Stay where you are. Don't tell anyone where you're hiding, not even your closest friends. It made sense, but it also made me furious. Why was I the one hiding like a criminal? Why couldn't I just live my life, go to work, meet with friends, just be normal? All because my husband turned out to be a greedy monster. I spent 3 days in that apartment, only stepping out to go to the nearest store. Daniel called every evening with updates. The police had found Matthew's fingerprints on the hotel room door handle. Security cameras had captured him entering the hotel about 30 minutes before I returned. This is strong evidence, Daniel said, sounding satisfied. Combined with your testimony about his earlier threats, I think they'll charge him soon. On Thursday night, I got a call on my regular phone, the one I kept switched off, checking only once a day. It was Isabella. Victoria, where are you? She cried. I called the hotel and they said you left 3 days ago. What's going on? I gave her a brief, careful version of events. I didn't want to scare her. Oh my God, she gasped. Matthew's lost his mind. Do you need help? Should I come to you? No, I said firmly. The fewer people know where I am, the better. Don't worry, I'm safe. I'll call you the moment this is over. After the call, the loneliness hit even harder. I wanted to talk to someone, to pour my heart out. But who? My parents were gone, my grandmother was gone. Only my best friend remained, and I couldn't even see her because of safety. But I didn't stay alone for long. The next morning, Michael called. Victoria, we've got a breakthrough, he said, clearly excited. The police arrested Matthew for stalking and making threats. He confessed. He confessed. I could barely believe it. He admitted to trying to scare me. More than that, Michael's tone turned serious. He admitted to hiring Parker to follow you and collect information. Claimed he just wanted to know where you were and who you were seeing. But the police think his intentions were much darker. A chill ran down my spine. Could the man I'd spent 12 years with really have meant to hurt me? Over money? So what now? I asked, trying to steady myself. Now we can breathe, Michael said. While the investigation is ongoing, Matthew will be under house arrest and banned from approaching you. That means you can go back to living your life. What if they release him? I still couldn't believe the nightmare was truly over. Even if it doesn't go to trial due to lack of evidence, the fact that criminal charges were filed will work in our favor during the divorce, Michael assured me. The court will take that into account. Right. The divorce. With everything that had happened, I'd almost forgotten we were still technically married. There was less than a month left until the mandatory reconciliation period ended. I decided to move back into my grandmother's apartment, where the repairs were finally complete. The workers had replaced the ruined floors, repainted the walls. Robert Stevens proudly showed me the finished space. Just like you wanted, Victoria, he said. Light colors, minimalist, cozy and open. I walked from room to room, remembering how it looked in my grandmother's time. Heavy curtains, old-fashioned furniture, bookshelves to the ceiling. But the change was good. This wasn't her apartment anymore, it was my home now. The place where I'd start over. The workers left, and I found myself alone in the quiet space. I sat on the windowsill in the living room, watching the familiar Chicago courtyard. Old maple trees, a kid's playground, elderly women chatting on benches. It was all the same, yet everything felt different. Because I was different. The doorbell startled me. Who could it be? I peeked through the peephole. It was Isabella, holding a big bag. Hey, homeowner, she grinned as I opened the door. Thought I'd stop by and help you get settled. Got some groceries and little things for the house. And this is from Kevin. She handed me a drawing. A house, the sun, and the words, Aunt Victoria in her new home. Tears welled up in my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. Thank you, Isabella, I said, hugging her tight. You have no idea how happy I am to see you. We spent the whole evening unpacking and making the apartment feel like home. Isabella had brought a bottle of champagne, and we popped it open once everything was in order. To your new home, she said, raising her glass. And your new life. To a new life, I echoed, warmth spreading through me, not from the champagne, but from the feeling that the worst was finally behind me. The next day, I returned to school. My co-workers greeted me warmly, asking how I was doing and how things were with my grandmother. I kept my answers vague, didn't want anyone knowing about my issues with Matthew, and definitely not about the inheritance. After classes, the principal, Jennifer Roberts, called me into her office. "I'm glad you're back, Victoria," she said, studying me closely. "Everything okay? You seem different." "I'm fine, Jennifer," I smiled. "Just been through a rough patch. Losing someone close to you is never easy." "I understand," she nodded. "If you need anything at all, we're here for you. You're a valuable part of this team." After leaving school, I decided to walk to the subway and soak in the warm May afternoon. The trees were lush with fresh leaves, tulips were blooming in flower beds, and the air smelled like spring. For the first time in a while, I felt alive, really alive and free. The feeling didn't last long. That evening, my lawyer called with unexpected news. "Victoria, things have changed," Michael's voice sounded tense. "Matthew changed his statement. Now he claims he wasn't behind the break-in at your hotel room. He says his fingerprints were there because he dropped off divorce papers earlier in the day. According to him, the hotel clerk let him in because he said you were his wife." "That's a lie," I snapped. "He didn't leave any documents. And the front desk couldn't have let him in without my permission." "The problem," Michael continued, "is that there's now a witness backing his story. The hotel clerk says he did let Matthew into the room, believing he had your consent." I was speechless with rage. "That's impossible. The clerk is lying. Matthew must have bribed him, it's obvious." "Maybe," Michael said. "But proving that won't be easy. And without proof, our case could fall apart." Despair washed over me. Was Matthew really going to get away with it again? "What do we do now?" I asked, trying to calm down. "We don't give up," Michael said firmly. "We still have an ace, Parker. If he confirms that Matthew hired him to stalk and intimidate you, this will take a very different turn." "Will he confirm it?" "That depends on his motivation," Michael said vaguely. "Daniel Rodriguez is working on it. He has ways of dealing with people like Parker." I didn't ask what those ways were. Some things are better left unknown. 2 days later, Daniel informed me that Parker had agreed to testify against Matthew. According to him, my husband had hired him not only to follow me, but also for more serious actions: intimidation, property damage, maybe even physical harm. "These are serious accusations," Daniel said. "If they hold up, your husband could face real prison time." I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted Matthew to face consequences. But another part, despite everything, felt a dull ache at the thought of the man I'd spent 12 years with ending up behind bars. "I don't want him in prison," I admitted. "I just want him to leave me alone." "I get that," Daniel nodded. "But sometimes the only way to make someone stop is to show them just how serious the consequences can be." That same evening, Matthew called me, for the first time since his arrest. "Victoria, we need to talk," he said, his voice full of desperation. "In person, just the two of us. It's really important." "I don't want to see you," I replied firmly. "Anything you need to say can go through the lawyers." "No, it can't," he insisted. "This is family stuff, things that need to stay between us. Please, Victoria. Just one conversation, and I swear I'll never bother you again." There was something in his voice that made me hesitate. It wasn't the smug, entitled Matthew who demanded 30% of my inheritance. It wasn't the vengeful Matthew who flooded my apartment and threatened me. This was someone broken. Desperate. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked after a pause. "Not over the phone," he said. "It's too personal. Let's meet in the park, somewhere public, where you'll feel safe." I hesitated. My head screamed it was a trap, but something deep inside, maybe old feelings, told me I should give him a chance to explain. Fine, I said at last. Tomorrow at 2, Lincoln Park, main entrance. And if you try anything. I won't, he interrupted quickly. Just a conversation, I swear. Thank you, Victoria. I hung up, uneasy. Was I making a huge mistake? Was I playing right into his new plan? Before the meeting, I called Daniel and Michael and told them about it. This is risky, Daniel said immediately. He's cornered and desperate. That's a dangerous combination. I agree, Michael added. Cancel the meeting, Victoria. Nothing good will come of it. But I had already made up my mind. I needed closure. I needed to hear the truth from Matthew, no matter how bitter it might be. I'm going, I said. But I'll be careful. I promise. The detective sighed. Then I'll be nearby, he said. Just in case. And please, don't go anywhere private with him. Stay where there are people. I nodded, grateful for his concern. Lincoln Park, so familiar since childhood, greeted me with sunshine and weekend crowds. It was the perfect day for a walk. Matthew was already waiting by the entrance, pale, gaunt, his suit wrinkled. Thanks for coming, he said instead of hello. Let's walk. We strolled slowly down the main path, keeping a deliberate distance. Matthew was quiet, like he didn't know where to begin. You said you wanted to talk, I reminded him. I'm listening. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Victoria, I screwed up, he finally said. Big time. Everything you've heard, everything I did, that wasn't me. Not the real me. Then who was it? I couldn't help the sarcasm. Your evil twin. No, just, he hesitated. Money, it changes people, Victoria. When I found out about the inheritance, something broke inside me. I became obsessed, getting that money no matter what. Even if it cost you our marriage. I asked softly. I wasn't thinking about that back then, he admitted. I only saw the numbers. 500,000. That's a lot, Victoria. A lot. So you were willing to do anything for it. Even hurt me. He looked away. That silence said more than words ever could. I never wanted to hurt you, he finally said. I just wanted to scare you, force you to take my deal. But things got out of hand. Parker, he's not someone you should mess with. He has his own methods. You hired a criminal to threaten your own wife, I shook my head. And now you expect me to believe you're sorry. I don't expect that, he stopped and looked me in the eyes. I just want you to know the truth. All of it. What truth, Matthew? I was exhausted by this conversation. That you never loved me. That you tolerated me for years. That you were ready to do anything for the money. What more is there to say? That your grandmother was in on it, he said quietly. I froze, not believing what I'd just heard. What did you say? Your grandmother, he repeated. She knew I wasn't with you out of love. She knew from the start. And she used it. Used it. I felt the ground slipping from under me. What are you talking about? She offered me a deal, Matthew spoke fast, like he was afraid he wouldn't get it all out. 10 years ago, right after we got married. She said if I was a good husband, took care of you, made you happy, she'd leave me half her estate. Half, Victoria. 250,000. I stood there stunned, unable to speak. My grandmother. My wise, principled grandmother made such a deal. I said yes, Matthew went on. It seemed like a win-win. You'd be happy in the marriage, I'd get the money, and your grandma would feel at peace knowing you were cared for. What went wrong? My voice didn't even sound like mine. She tricked me, Matthew's voice was bitter. Left everything to you. Not a word about me in the will. Then she died, and I couldn't even make a legal claim. There was no contract. Just a verbal promise. Anger started to rise in me. So you decided to take it out on me. I couldn't believe this. Punish me because she betrayed you. I was furious, Matthew admitted. 12 years of pretending, and for nothing. I snapped, Victoria. You can't understand what it's like, to be that close to wealth and lose it all in a second. I looked at the man I'd spent 12 years with and realized I didn't recognize him at all. He was a stranger. So you never loved me, I said. It wasn't a question. Not in the beginning, Matthew looked away. It was a deal. But over time I got attached. In my own way. I don't know if it was love, but... Stop, I raised a hand. Just tell me why you really wanted to meet. What do you want from me now? I want you to drop the charges, he said quietly. Parker's testimony could put me in prison. And me. I won't survive in there, Victoria. Why should I save you? My voice trembled with emotion. After everything you've done. Because you're better than me, he said simply. You always have been. And because I have something to offer in return. What is it? Your teddy bear, Matthew looked at me. The one from your dad. I didn't throw it away 12 years ago like I told you. It's been at my mother's house, in her closet, all this time. Tears stung my eyes. The bear. The only thing I had left from my father. I'd accidentally left it at my ex's place years ago, and when I moved in with Matthew, I told him the story. He said he'd talked to the guy, then later told me the bear had been thrown out and couldn't be recovered. You stole it, I whispered. You took something so personal, just to use it later. Yes, Matthew didn't deny it. It was insurance. In case your grandmother went back on her word. I stared at him, realizing this man was a complete stranger. Every word, every gesture had been part of a long, elaborate lie. 12 years of lies. I'll drop the charges, I said at last. But not for you. For me. So I can end this nightmare and start fresh. Matthew exhaled with relief. Thank you, Victoria. I knew you. And I want the bear back, I cut him off. Today. And after that, I don't want to see you again. Ever. I understand, he lowered his gaze. I deserve that. We walked away in opposite directions, he toward the park exit, and I deeper into the path where Daniel Rodriguez was waiting for me. Are you okay? The detective asked, clearly concerned. What did he want to talk about? I gave him a brief summary of our conversation, leaving out the part about the deal with my grandmother. That was too personal, too painful to share. You're really planning to drop the charges? Daniel asked, surprised. After everything he's done? Yes, I said firmly. I want to close this chapter. Completely. No court cases. No jail time. No revenge. That same evening, Matthew brought back the bear. The same one from my childhood, with the worn-out ear and the patch on its paw. I took it without inviting him in. Our final exchange was short. Goodbye, Victoria, he said. And... I'm sorry, if you can believe that. Goodbye, Matthew, I replied as I closed the door. The next day, I officially dropped the charges, stating I no longer wished to pursue them. The police weren't happy, but without my testimony, the case fell apart. The divorce was finalized quickly and without complications. Matthew didn't contest a single term, not the property division, not the inheritance. He got his share from the apartment sale and vanished from my life. Later I heard he moved to Detroit, to get away from me, from Chicago, from the memories. 6 months passed. I went back to teaching and bought a small house in the suburbs. A dream I'd never been able to afford before. My grandmother's money, managed wisely with help from a financial advisor, gave me a steady income. Sometimes I thought about what Matthew had said about the deal with my grandmother. Did I believe it? Could the woman I knew, so principled and honest, really do something like that? Maybe. After all, she more than anyone wanted to protect me, to make sure I was happy. And if that meant making a deal with the devil, I could understand why she did it. One evening, while going through some of her old belongings, I found a box I'd never noticed before. Inside were letters, photographs, and a small envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dear Victoria," the letter began, written in her neat handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and you've likely learned the truth about your husband. Forgive me for interfering in your life, for letting that man stay by your side out of selfish motives. I thought I was doing what was best, that in time he'd truly fall in love with you. But I was wrong. And in my final days, seeing the way he hovered around me, I realized he hadn't changed. That's why I changed my will. All the money goes to you, my sweet girl. Use it wisely. And remember, no amount of wealth can ever replace real love and honest relationships. Yours always, Grandma." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. So Matthew hadn't lied. The deal had been real. But my grandmother, seeing his true nature, had changed her mind at the last moment. Before going to bed, I took the old teddy bear from the closet, the only thing left from that past life. But now, it wouldn't remind me of loss. It would remind me that even in the hardest moments, you have to stay true to yourself. And if you do, things will eventually turn around. That morning, I woke up with a sense that it really was a new day. A new life. No more lies. No more betrayal. No more fear. A life where I was in charge of my own fate. My grandmother didn't just leave me an inheritance, she left me a powerful lesson. Money can change your life, but only you can decide in which direction it takes you. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates us to create new, heartfelt stories every day. Don't miss our next video. Take care, and be happy.